The first morning it happened, her SUV blocked my driveway like it owned me. HOA Karen stepped out smiling, clipboard ready, rules dangling like a threat. I asked politely, voice calm, driveway clearly marked, patience already thinning. She laughed, said rules were flexible, then walked off toward someone else's house. I fumed quietly, sipping coffee, imagining every scenario where I could teach her a lesson. The camera in my mind replayed her smirk over and over, testing my patience. That night, I scoured HOA bylaws, city codes, and parking ordinances carefully. Everything confirmed that she was entirely, unmistakably, flagrantly in the wrong. I printed photos of her SUV, the exact time and date of each offense. Then I wrote a polite email to the HOA board detailing each violation clearly. Their reply came swift and cold, telling me to resolve neighborly as if joking. I stared at the screen, fury mixing with a spark of cunning determination. Saturday arrived, and true to form, her SUV blocked my driveway again, smiling smugly. I let her settle in, pretending I didn't notice, waiting for the right moment. That's when I decided to stop reacting and start planning a smarter move. She loved rules, I thought, so I'd use every rule in the book. First, I installed a motion camera, hidden but perfectly aligned to catch everything. Next, I posted temporary signage, authorized vehicles only, small, unassuming, almost invisible. Then I applied temporary paint lines marking my driveway with precise dimensions. I filed a formal permit for a short-term construction obstruction, fully legal. By morning, the trap was invisible, boring, and yet perfectly set. She returned, SUV gleaming, confidence radiating, completely unaware of the quiet storm. I sipped coffee on my porch, eyes on the rearview mirror, calm but ready. An hour later, enforcement arrived, clipboards heavier than her entitlement ever was. Karen's smile faltered as the officers politely explained the violation and towing procedure. Her SUV was hooked up, flashing lights reflecting on her shocked face. I felt a rush, not from revenge, but from rules finally working as intended. She stormed over later, red-faced, yelling about favoritism and conspiracies. I handed her printed bylaws, permits, and the HOA email, voice steady. Neighbors gathered quietly, reading documents, nodding, whispers filling the street. Power shifted subtly, without shouting, insults, or breaking any rules myself. HOA Karen's fury became impotent, as every violation was documented. Undeniable, public. I smiled quietly, knowing my patience had paid off in a way she'd never see. The board called a meeting, suddenly alert, suddenly concerned about rules enforcement. Policies were revised, clearly posted, and enforcement procedures rewritten for transparency. Karen never parked near my driveway again, not once, fear replacing smugness. Weeks passed, and I noticed her avoiding eye contact entirely. Clipboard useless now. I didn't gloat. I watched quietly, savoring the subtle satisfaction of order restored. Still, a small part of me wondered what she might try next, a lingering suspense. Then one Friday, a new neighbor moved in, oblivious to HOA drama. Karen tried to intimidate them with the same clipboard, same smug grin, but I observed silently, realizing my lesson extended beyond just MIT was precedent now. That night I checked cameras, seeing Karen walk back frustrated SUV, untouched by rules. A tiny thrill ran through me. The system worked without me lifting a finger. Morning came, and her SUV remained absent, her territory slowly shrinking, silent and powerless. I began documenting improvements in my neighborhood, small changes reflecting my quiet influence. Karen noticed, of course, glaring from behind blinds, plotting, scheming silently. I smiled. Anticipation was hers. Patience, mine. Days passed, and she tried subtle intimidation, moving her SUV to block walkways instead. Enforcement caught her again. Citation after citation, proving that the trap was scalable. Every scene replayed itself in my mind like a cinematic slow-motion victory. The board thanked me quietly for evidence and clarity. Nods of approval exchanged. Karen's complaints became background noise, emails dismissed automatically by HOA procedure. I felt untouchable, not because of aggression, but because I understood systems perfectly. Still, suspense lingered. What if she tried something more daring, more public, more humiliating? I planned contingencies quietly, every possible move anticipated, traps ready if necessary. Another Saturday SUV returns, this time with a neighbor daring to block too. Let enforcement handle it again. Law and rules carrying the weight for me. Karen watched, seething, powerless, as her former playground turned into a courtroom of justice. I noticed subtle shifts in her behavior, calculating moves replaced by hesitation and caution. The neighborhood observed, slowly learning the new balance of power quietly enforced. Even minor violations were now documented, creating an invisible web of accountability. Karen's arrogance shrank. Her smirk faded into forced neutrality, her aura cracked. I remained calm, sipping coffee, pretending none of it affected me, yet savoring control. Weeks later, an HOA newsletter highlighted proper parking etiquette with photos, subtly including my driveway. Karen turned pale reading it, realizing the public had already seen her failures. I felt a ripple of triumph. The lesson was now immortalized in community record. Neighbors whispered quietly, finally, "Justice," while Karen grew increasingly isolated in her own drama. She tried one last intimidation SUV at sunset, dramatic glare at me, no one else around. I smiled subtly, motioned enforcement discreetly, and the trap caught her effortlessly again. Towing lights flashed, reflection on her red face, dignity stripped in silence. She stormed inside her house, slamming doors, muttering complaints no one listened to anymore. Calm returned to my street, the quiet satisfaction of rules finally being respected. I hosted a small block gathering, neighbors thanking me, sharing stories of previous frustrations. Karen stayed inside, watching shadows, powerless. Her influence diminished, irrelevant to everyone else. Weeks became months. Her attempts dwindled, SUV parked elsewhere, eyes never meeting mine. I realized victory wasn't a moment. It was a pattern, a precedent set quietly. I continued documenting, not for vengeance, but for order, proof, and accountability. Each incident she attempted failed, another cinematic pause for suspense, before inevitable enforcement. My neighbors started noticing the consistency, slowly adopting respectful, rule-abiding behavior themselves. Karen tried subtle emotional manipulation, complaints to friends, gossip, whispers, yet no one cared. The tension remained, cinematic, palpable, but now entirely one-sided, suspense dangling only from her attempts. One winter morning, snow blanketed the street. SUV tracks led nowhere near my driveway. Relief was quiet, cinematic in its stillness, justice having settled like snowfall on roofs. Karen's shadow lingered, but only as a memory of past arrogance and failed schemes. I felt a small smile, sipping hot coffee, eyes on an empty driveway, rules intact. New neighbors asked how I handled it so calmly. Strategy over rage, patience over pride. I told them simply, observe, document, let the rules do the talking. Karen finally left the neighborhood, SUV gone, clipboard abandoned, stories fading like dust in sunlight. A sense of cinematic closure settled, suspense evaporated, victory unshouted but complete. I reflected on every trap, every patient move, every law leveraged perfectly, quietly. The street felt lighter, neighbors calmer, and my driveway forever mine, protected by patience. Justice was not loud, but it was seen, recorded, undeniable, and unstoppable. Karen's chapter closed, her legacy replaced by order, accountability, and quiet triumph. I sipped coffee one last time, cinematic satisfaction lingering, knowing rules always win when respected.